welcome to the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life. My name is Jeff Harding. I'm sitting in for Kyle Case, who's out of town. Joining me today is Michelle Graves. Michelle, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
You look like you're doing great, just sitting there, smiling, enjoying. She looks so professional with her earphones on, too.
Thank you.
Hey, Michelle, this is the 30th anniversary of the Games this year. Have you heard anything about that? Is that new to you?
Yeah, I'm kind of grasping that concept, getting my brain around it. It seems like things are speeding up a little bit in the office these days.
Things are getting really busy. We already have 6,250 participants signed up.
I know. We're looking good, aren't
That is
we?
amazing. But with that, we also have some sports that have shut down. We have pickleball that closed, of course, in 7 hours.
Yeah.
And bowling is now closed. And we cannot accept any more teams in volleyball or softball. But the rest of our sports at this point are still open. So if you want to get in, you got to run out and sign up right now while you're thinking about it.
You know, now really is the time. I mean, we're counting down. We have exactly 3 months to go, but hotels are filling. So you kind of have a little more time to get in the games, but a little less time to maybe get some preferred housing.
Yes.
So it's important to think about it now.
To stay where you want to stay.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, Michelle, have you given much thought to vitamin D?
Yeah. Vitamin D is a very important necessity in my life.
It is.
I call it red rock therapy.
Well, that's not exactly vitamin D, but if you're hanging out in the red rocks, you're probably getting some.
Exactly.
Well, according to some research, there are at least 5 ways that it does affect our health. So if you live in North America, there's a pretty good chance you're low on vitamin D. About 42% of U.S. adults are deficient in the nutrient, according to the journal Nutrition Research.
Yeah.
And that's not
you know
good.
why? That's because it doesn't come out. It doesn't emit out of our computers or our cell phones.
Yeah, the radiation is coming from the computer. There's no vitamin D in it.
Yeah, it's a shame. They should fix that.
Well, they should. And you should have your blood work done to see what your vitamin D is, to see if you need to get any more.
Yeah, it's really true.
But here's some of the symptoms of low vitamin D, or some things that low vitamin D can cause. The first is depression. People with low vitamin D in their blood were more than twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression than those with higher levels, according to a study by the British Journal of Psychiatry that included more than 3,100 participants. So that's a lot of people. 3,100.
Yeah. It's a real problem today. We really don't play outside enough, it seems.
That's right. The hippocampus and other areas of the brain involved in regulating your mood contain vitamin D receptors, so low levels may affect the ability of those regions to function normally. The second one is you're less likely to survive cancer. Cancer patients who have higher levels of vitamin D when they're diagnosed tend to live longer and remain in remission longer than patients who are deficient, according to a study published by the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is.
I wonder if that has part to do with activity, too. I mean, when you go outside, you tend to be a little more active than sitting at your desk.
It could be, but it went on to say that they found that every 10-point increase in vitamin D levels was associated with a 4% increase in survival among cancer patients. So that's pretty strong.
Significant.
Yeah, it is.
That's great.
The next is you have a higher risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Oh.
Adults who were moderately deficient in vitamin D had a 53% higher risk of developing dementia, and those who were severely deficient had a 125% risk of getting the disease compared to individuals who have a healthy level.
We might be able to ask an expert about that soon.
I think we might be able to. The next one is you can get pneumonia. The risk of developing pneumonia is more than 2.5% times greater in people with the lowest levels of vitamin D in their blood. And that's according to the researchers at the University of Eastern Finland. Previous research suggested vitamin D deficiency weakens the immune system, which increases your risk of contracting illnesses such as respiratory infections.
I can see the correlation there. That makes sense.
And the last one is it may speed up multiple sclerosis. Previous research has found that low vitamin D levels are associated with an increased risk of neuromuscular disorders such as multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease, among others. Now, a new study suggests that if you have multiple sclerosis, low levels of vitamin D could speed the severity of the progression of the disease. And researchers also have found that early-stage multiple sclerosis patients with adequate levels of vitamin D had a 57% chance, a 57% lower rate of new brain lesions and a 57% lower relapse rate than those with lower vitamin D. So Go out and get in the sun.
Yeah, it's a really good reason to sit outside a little bit every day, isn't it?
That's an excellent reason.
Even though it's 150 degrees or so here right now.
Well, here, but not everywhere.
Right.
And speaking of getting out in the sun, we have a guest joining us from Provo, Utah. We have Dr. Ron Hager. Dr. Ron, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Michelle.
Ron, you do get out in the sun a bit, don't you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been working at the tennis camps at BYU, helping out some of the coaches, so I'm probably in the sun more than I should be.
Well, that's good because your vitamin D levels are probably high.
Yeah, but my exhaustion levels are also high.
So,
Yeah, that sounds like an added job.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's nice of you.
Ron is one of the co-directors for our health screenings at the Huntsman World Senior Games, and he's also an expert in the field of gerontology. So, Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been at BYU. This is my 17th year, and I've been coming down to the senior games from Provo with about 40 to 50, sometimes 60 students every year to help with the health screenings for about the last 16 years.
I bet your car's really rocking on the way down.
Yeah. Well, they come down on their own. I don't bring them all in my car.
Okay.
It's a really great service that you offer to our athletes. It's co-funded by the Eccles Foundation, which we're really grateful for. But without those students and you kind of leading that cause, I mean, our athletes would not receive what they do in this really significant, comprehensive free screening. So thank you.
Well, it actually goes both ways, Michelle, because the students get an experience as well that they otherwise would not have. And I cannot tell you how many times every single year I hear students talking about how their whole attitude and perception of what it means to get older changes.
Yeah. I was just getting my teeth cleaned at the dentist the other day, and the lady that was helping me was telling me how she had worked our health screenings at Dixie University.
Oh, wow.
And what a great experience that was for her when she found out that I worked for the games. She's like, oh, I love the games. And they get some pretty key experience working with our athletes, don't they?
Yeah, it's fantastic because, here at BYU we have a gerontology minor, and it's fairly popular on campus. We wish we had more students, but, as word gets around, we'll get more. But, they get a lot of, information in the classroom, but when they get out and kind of see how active, healthy seniors live their lives, it really does kind of open their eyes and their mind to, what it means. I mean, a lot of times young people think that getting older is, something you fear or something that, they never want to happen to them kind of a thing. But they meet some of these people down there at these health screenings, and there'll be over 10,000 athletes at the games and probably 25 to 3,500 that come through the health screenings. So they get a lot of exposure, and they have a whole paradigm shift. They come back talking about how, their perception has changed and that they no longer fear getting older. In fact, I'm not going to go so far as to say they look forward to it or they want it to happen sooner, but they can see that healthy and active lifestyles, translate into something that they can, be a part of, and they really like it.
Yeah, it is neat to see. It was really remarkable being my first year at the games, the feats of athleticism. I mean, because being younger, I can't accomplish half of the things that our athletes accomplish. They're just amazing.
Yeah,
they're really defying the odds, and we want that to become the norm. It's really great.
The active aging, yes. Now, Ron, one of the symptoms or one of the things that we fear often about getting older is dementia.
Yeah.
And I know that with your studies in gerontology, you've done some research on that. So maybe why don't we talk a little bit about how the active lifestyle might stave off dementia?
Well, there's a lot of things related to, a healthy and active lifestyle. It's not just about being an athlete, and it's not even just about, eating right and exercising. There are a lot of other things involved, that promote health, including, things like how you manage your stress or how much, sleep you're getting. Is your body getting the rest that it needs? And those kinds of things. But you're absolutely right, Jeff. Alzheimer's actually is probably nowadays among the elderly even more feared than cancer. It used to be that cancer was, the insidious disease that everybody feared.
That's right.
But nowadays,
It's
because
curable.
Alzheimer's is becoming so much more prevalent or common. And some of that legitimately has to do with just an aging population. The baby boomers are now coming into their later years, and there's just a whole bunch of them. So from that perspective alone, you would expect prevalence, to go up. But there is actually an acceleration going on, and Alzheimer's disease accounts for, on the high end, as much as 80% of all dementia cases, and it's a progressive, very debilitating disease. And if, you or any of the listeners out there, have known somebody with Alzheimer's or has cared for somebody with Alzheimer's, you know that it can be very hard on the person with the disease, but it can also be very hard on the individuals caring for those with the disease. And it's, it's a situation where, people are basically robbed of their ability to think clearly, to solve problems, to keep working, to even remember faces and names and things that they've known all their lives. They can no longer remember those things. And there are some data now that suggests that it may actually be the third leading cause of death in the United States among the elderly, just behind cardiovascular disease and cancer. But for the last decade or more, it has been in the top 10 causes of death.
Well, if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life on Fox News AM 1450. We're talking with Dr. Ron Hager from BYU, and we're talking about Alzheimer's. And Ron, let's talk about things that people might be able to do to stave off or hold back or lessen the effects of Alzheimer's.
Well, that's a great opportunity to mention just a couple things, Jeff, because right now, there's a lot of research being done in Alzheimer's studies. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes of Health. There's a lot of funding going into this research. The unfortunate thing is that these neurodegenerative diseases, the therapies that have been studied and developed have been perhaps the greatest failure in any kind of biomedical research. And the reason I say that is because specifically in the case of Alzheimer's disease, there's not a single therapeutic, meaning like a medication,
right,
that exerts any kind of sustained effect on Alzheimer's. In other words, there's nothing to cure it. There's nothing really to even slow it down in any kind of a sustained way. And that's after at least 10 years of research, hundreds of clinical trials, and billions of dollars spent. So that's why I say, it may arguably be one of the greatest failures in medical research.
Yes, it might be.
Because after 10 years and billions of dollars and hundreds of clinical trials, there's essentially, I'm not going to say there's nothing to show for it, but there's nothing effective to show for it. So
I think that's why we fear it so much too, because when you get that diagnosis that there really is
basically a death sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, a couple of years ago in the journal Aging, a physician and researcher named Dale E. Bredesen published a study called "Reversal of Cognitive Decline: A Novel Therapeutic Program." So this was in 2014, so just a couple of years ago. It's an anecdotal study, so you can't really determine, cause and effect conclusions, but the results were pretty remarkable. His attitude, his approach was that, these monotherapeutics, these single medicines, or even single medicines but used maybe in combination with each other, are just having no effect on Alzheimer's disease. And he goes through in the article and talks about, why some of that might be, but to kind of skip past, a lot of the, the physiology and the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, he conducted a series of case studies on 10 patients. And now I'd just like to mention a couple things about a couple of these case studies. One of the patients was a 67-year-old woman who came in to see the doctor and had been experiencing progressive memory loss for about 2 years. And she had a very demanding job. She was a professional, person, working, and but she could no longer analyze data. She could no longer prepare reports or deliver those reports, and this was a major part of her job. So she was actually having to consider quitting her job. And she found herself, she would like read a page of information, and she'd get to the bottom of the page and have to start over because she couldn't remember what she had read, and that was just on a single page of information.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I do that sometimes, but mostly I'm nodding off to sleep. But she was also very good at working with numbers, especially in preparing these reports. But she found that she couldn't even remember 4-digit numbers. She had to start writing all of this down.
Wow.
And then she started having difficulty driving, not like actually driving the car, but just remembering where she's going or remembering how to get from point A to point B, so her navigation skills. So in other words, these things that were part of her memory, her ability to recall was being impaired. It was not that she was getting lost, but she was even mixing up the names of her pets and couldn't remember where light switches were in her own home. So that's just over a 2-year period. So that's
pretty dramatic.
That would be pretty alarming.
Yeah.
Well, it's like information just disappears. Like I'm no expert, but I really did enjoy the book Still Alice, and it's kind of describes a lady like you're describing who got it really early. And of course, when you start to lose your memory and your mind at an early age, you think, what could possibly be wrong, Right.
And especially, your kids or your friends or other people that are close to you, they start seeing this, they become concerned as well. So her mother, in this case study, this woman's mother also had died from Alzheimer's disease. And so she had gone to see her doctor and said, my mother died from this, and I seem to be experiencing some of this. This is in some of her more lucid moments. She's able to communicate with the doctor. And the doctor said to her, there is nothing that can be done about it.
How terrible.
Well, now she's recalling, how her mother, basically suffered, for the last years of her life in a nursing home and saw her progressive decline. So it's no surprise that the end decision that she made was to commit suicide because she knew what was in store for her, and the doctor had just told her that there was nothing that could be done. Well, she called a friend, fortunately, to kind of commiserate with this friend, and the friend said, get on a plane and come and see me. And this friend had heard about a study being conducted by Dr. Bredesen, and so she enrolled in this study. And so Dr. Bredesen kind of took this sort of systems approach. He said, if not one thing is working to fix Alzheimer's disease, then probably not one thing is related to its underlying cause.
Makes sense.
So he took a whole person kind of an approach to this, and let me just mention what this woman did. So because there's about 25 things that's part of this, what Dr. Bredesen calls a therapeutic system, and none of his patients did all of them, because it's just too difficult for some of these people, I guess, to commit to do all of these things and comply. But they did as good as they could. So this first case study, this woman, she eliminated all simple carbohydrates, which actually that dietary modification alone led to a weight loss of 20 pounds. So it helped her have a more healthy BMI. She eliminated gluten and processed food from her diet. She increased vegetables and fruits and non-farmed fish. She worked on reducing her stress. She began to take a yoga class and to meditate for 20 minutes twice a day, and she received some guidance, some coaching instruction on how to do that. And then she also took some supplements. She took a small melatonin supplement. She increased her sleep from 4 to 5 hours per night to 7 to 8 hours per night. She took a B12 supplement, a vitamin D supplement, a fish oil supplement. She took a CoQ10, which is an antioxidant supplement. She began to use an electric flosser and an electric toothbrush. And you say, well, what would that have to do with anything? Well, a lot of systemic infection. Now, what I'm talking about is low-grade infection throughout your body can begin in the mouth.
Right.
So good oral hygiene is critical. So she began to use, an electric flosser and toothbrush. She reinstated hormone replacement therapy, which she had discontinued. And get this, she fasted for a minimum of 12 hours between dinner and breakfast, and for a minimum of 3 hours between dinner and bedtime. So you think about the world we live in today and how readily available food is.
Wow, that's impressive.
A lot of people don't, do the breakfast, lunch, dinner thing. It's more, you go to work and there's all kinds.
You graze all
there are
day and
businesses
night.
and companies now that have entire kitchens, and they just load it up for their employees. That's kind of one of these fringe benefits. So food is always available. And the last thing she did, I know that's quite a list. There was about 14 things on that list. The last thing she did was to exercise for a minimum of 30 minutes a day, 4 to 6 days per week. Okay, so that's what she did, and her outcome, was remarkable. Okay, so she did some, but not all. So after 3 months of doing those things, all of her memory loss symptoms were gone.
Wow, that is impressive.
Were totally gone, and her memory after 3 months was better than it had been in many years. And 2.5 years later, at age 70, she's still asymptomatic, no symptoms, and continues to work full time.
Well, that really suggests that there's a lot that we can do, or a lot that we are doing to harm ourselves that we don't even realize we're doing. Ron,
it's just really, this study is just awesome. Now, obviously, it needs to be followed up with, some type of a clinical trial.
Right.
But there were 10 patients in this study. Now, one of them was in late stages of Alzheimer's disease, and they did not respond to this therapy. But the other 9 were either in early stage Alzheimer's or had mild cognitive impairment or selective cognitive impairment. They had some kind of dementia-related condition, and all of the other 9 responded very favorably, most becoming completely asymptomatic.
Well, Ron, that's amazing, and unfortunately, we've run out of time, but we'll have to bring you back again to talk about this some more, because this is fascinating, and I think it's something that we all need to pay attention to, that we need to take control of our health, we need to make healthier decisions, and that every decision we make affects our health.
Yeah, either for the good or for the bad, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And you can't just say that because something's in a grocery store it's safe, or because there's so many modern conveniences today that I can have a life of ease, that's what you should go for.
That's what's scary today, all the environmentals. Well, this has been fascinating, and this is really good news for Alzheimer's patients. So we really are so grateful to have you, and thank you for coming on today, Ron.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Fascinating to speak with you.
And that's all the time we have for today, and thank you for joining us, Ron. We want to thank the audience for joining us as well. Remember to join us each and every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. for the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life on Fox News 1450 a.m. You can also listen to this and any other show on seniorgames.net. As mentioned at the top of the show, registration is now open and going strong. If you'd like to register, go to www.seniorgames.net and click on the Register tab. We'd love to hear from you. If there's something you'd like to tell us about our show, then send us an email at activelife@seniorgames.net. And our quote for the day is from the esteemed Woody Allen. It's, "You can live to be 100 if you give up all the things that make you want to live to be 100.
Good advice.
Until next time, goodbye, everyone, and stay active.